Zach Johnson. Jared Gerker.
Mr. Boland. Oh, yep. Didn't sound like it was working. Hello, hello, hello. That works a lot better. Hi. Okay.
Hello, testing, testing.
Ms. Baldwin, you are your name?
I did not. Aaron Baldwin Day.
Okay. And then on the phone, I have Mr. Myers. Are you there?
Yes, thanks, Chair. And
Thanks.
I have to jump off at 11:30. I've got a meeting. I just want to let you know.
Okay. Thanks for letting me know. And Mr. Voland, are you there?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thanks for being here, everyone. Okay. We have a pretty full agenda today. Just as a reminder for those on the phone, if you need to get into the queue, just send me a text and I'll add you to the list. Ms. Brown, are you just you for today? Oh, okay, great, okay. Okay, and just I want to make just a slight change to the agenda just for clarification. We are going to be discussing AO 2025-74, but we'll be doing that last. So, and it's not part of the administration's update. So after item 4, then we'll add in the AO 2025 at that point, and then we'll do public comment. So just a slight adjustment to the agenda. Okay, and I think we're ready for you, Ms. Brown, whenever you'd like to begin. If you could share your name for the record, and you can start.
Farina Brown, Special Assistant, Mayor's Office.
Thea Agnew-Benben, Special Assistant, Mayor's Office.
And I believe first we have on the agenda is an update from our Health Department Director on our congregate shelter contract extension.
Good morning, Kimberly Rash, Anchorage Health Department. I wanted to talk about the Congregate Shelter Contract Amendment 2 with Catholic Social Services. You will be seeing this memorandum come to you next week on Tuesday, the 24th. What it is doing a 2-month extension. So currently the contract ends on 6/30. And so we are extending that contract at the East 56 location from 7/1 to 8/31, and that is for up to 200 individuals residing at that location. 200 individuals residing. Oh, there we go again. And so again, one of the reasons why we're doing this is to ensure that we have continuity of operations as we continue to look at the scattered site model, and so as to not displace the individuals that are staying there. This 2-month gap or this 2-month extension will assist us in that process of moving individuals from East 56 to the scattered site model that we are currently in confidential negotiations with.
Questions? Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Thanks. And we feel confident that by the end of the 2-month extension, there'll be sufficient capacity in the scatter site model to absorb the 200 people or however many we have currently at East 56.
Yes.
And are they close to capacity right now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Can you remind us what the goal for the scattered site? What are the numbers for that? Or do they match the numbers that are at the East 56 now, or is there going to be more?
So in our original strategy document, we committed to keeping 50 non-congregate beds open and to maintain our congregate shelter year-round. So our hope is between the two, we've been able to extend our non-congregate for 100 beds at the last meeting. So overall, we're hoping to have 250 beds total between non-congregate and congregate.
Okay, and currently there are 200 beds at the East 56.
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, I think I have something. Oh, never mind. Okay, any other questions on that? And when is that coming before us?
Tuesday,
Okay,
the
great.
24th.
Great. Thanks very much. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions on that one. We can go on.
Next up is actually their Housing 2025 HUD Action Plan presentation. So Jed Drolet will be coming up to give that presentation.
So Jed Drolet, Community Systems Program Manager with Anchorage Health Department, and I'm going to be giving a presentation here about our 2025 action plan for our HUD funding. This will be coming to the body on Tuesday, the 24th for introduction, and then to be set for public meeting on July 15th. Can I get next slide, please? So I'm Jed Drolet, Community Systems Program Manager. I oversee our entitlement HUD funding, as well as some other programs that we do in the housing, homelessness, and community development space. Next slide. So I'm going to give a little overview of the HUD planning process. I know we have some new members on the body, and we might need a refresher. We do this every year, but I know it is kind of a complicated process. So I want to go over what our requirements are. Next slide, please. So we're required as an entitlement community for our HUD funding to do 3 documents. One is a 5-year consolidated plan, which is our big picture strategic plan of what priority needs and goals we're trying to meet with this funding. Then each year we have an annual action plan in which we spell out which specific projects we're going to fund to try to meet those needs. And then each year we also have a consolidated annual performance and evaluation report, or CAPER, which reports on our progress in meeting those needs each year with that funding. Next slide. So the main programs covered by this planning process, there's 3 kind of core programs that we get as an entitlement community directly from HUD. That's Community Development Block Grant. It's our largest, best known program. Home Investment Partnerships Program and Emergency Solutions Grant. We also sometimes get Housing Trust Fund funding as a sub-grantee from the state of Alaska, from AHFC, which is the grantee for that program. That's a negotiation between us and AHFC. We haven't had that in recent years, but we are discussing trying to get that funding in the future. Next slide. So this slide just shows the program amounts that we've gotten each year for the past 5 years, including this year, 2025. They fluctuate from year to year. This is a formula that's done at a nationwide level to determine how much each community gets from each program. You can see we typically get a little less than $2 million in CDBG, around 600,000 or 700,000 in home, and around 150,000, 160,000 in ESG. And we have not had Housing Trust Fund in the past 5 years. But again, that's something that we will be talking to HFC about potentially getting in the future. Next slide. So I'm going to go over the goals and the priority needs that are in the con plan, just to give a sense of what we are trying to do with this. We are probably going to be making some amendments to the con plan at some point to kind of specify a little more closely the particular things we're trying to achieve. But this is what is in our currently approved plan. Next slide. So the priority needs, and these are like very broad scale, big picture things about what we're trying to do with this funding. Homeless populations, low income and housed populations, public facilities, and public services are kind of the big broad areas that we're trying to address with this funding. Next slide. And then underneath that, we have a series of goals that are a little more specific, in some cases, much more specific. And I think this is one thing that we will be looking to amend the con plan to specify a little more what level we're focusing the goals on. But basically goals: rental housing development, homeowner rehab, mobile home repair, homeowner development. This is the new construction for homeowner owned housing, public facilities, public services. Next slide, please. Tenant-based rental assistance, community housing development organization, operating expense assistance, economic development, homeless prevention, and rapid rehousing. And some of these are much more specific to types of projects that probably don't need to be at the goal level. But this is what we've had the past couple con plans. And so they are still in our current one. Next slide. So spending, I just want to give a sense of, for the past few years, how much we have spent each year from each of these programs and which broad categories of projects we've funded and spent on that. So I just have a few charts here. Next slide. So for CDBG, this is, and for all of these charts are based on our draws of HUD funding, which is a reimbursement basis. And so the year in which these are showing up on these graphs is not necessarily the year in which that money was actually spent. It's when we got reimbursed for it. But basically, we've got 4 big categories of CDBG funding: affordable housing, public facilities, public services, and then admin/other. And you can see that the amounts have fluctuated a bit from year to year, but we do typically put a lot of that into affordable housing, public facilities, and then we put in as much as we can with public services, but that is actually capped at 15% of the CDBG grant. So we would do more public services if we could. There's a huge need, but we do as much as we can. Next slide.
If I can pause you just for a second, just want to mention that Mr. Rivera has joined the meeting. Thank you.
So for home funding, and you can see here that particularly that reimbursement mechanism means that we haven't always had that money show up in our draws each year. These often are big construction projects that take a few years to accomplish, and so we typically get reimbursed mostly toward the end of those. The big categories here, home is very focused on housing specifically, whereas CDBG is more general. So affordable home ownership, rental housing development, tenant-based rental assistance, and then there's a small admin percentage for home. But primarily this funds that home ownership and rental housing development and a certain portion of tenant-based rental assistance. Next slide.
Actually, I need to pause you for one more second.
Yeah.
I've been told that Miss Silvers is also on the phone, just for the record. Thanks.
Now for ESG, this is a little bit of a different look here. And the reason for this is that there was a big influx of COVID-specific funding for ESG, which is normally a pretty small program. But with some of the COVID response legislation, there were some big influxes of money into this program. And so that shows up here primarily in the 2022 column. ESG, this was originally called Emergency Shelter Grant. It was later broadened to Emergency Solutions Grant, but it is generally focused more on specifically on the homelessness issue. And so we put portions of that toward homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, emergency shelter, homeless outreach, and then there's an admin/other category there that looks a little bit higher in the 2024 because we did provide some funding for the homeless management information system management, which shows up in that category. Generally, this is a relatively small grant, but for a few years there, it was pretty large. Next slide. So I want to say a little bit about our request for grant proposals process and the way we are moving toward allocating our funding, which is a little bit of a change from how it has been in past years. Starting this year is really the first year that we've been rolling out this process from the beginning of the planning cycle. Next slide. So this is basically putting out requests for grant proposals as a competitive solicitation rather than selecting them in a more informal manner, which has often been the case in the past. This is a new, more formal, transparent process for selecting projects. And starting with 2025, this is now our main way of doing allocations. We did do a couple of these to allocate some past funding. But for new funding, we're going to move toward this as the primary way that we're selecting projects. Next slide. So the strategic direction we're taking with this is to do fewer but larger projects, leveraging other funds, try to use this funding efficiently, and targeting the biggest community needs, which primarily we found are housing supply and then supportive services, and trying to target our funding into the places where it makes the most sense, given that the need is well beyond our capacity, particularly with these relatively small funding sources. Next slide. So for 2025, we put out a request for grant proposals for, and we kept it pretty broad what the category was, but CDBG capital projects for housing and or shelter acquisition to increase our supply of both housing and shelter to kind of see what projects were out there that we might be able to fund. We did select a grantee. That intent to award has been posted, and that's True North Recovery, which is planning to acquire a property that is currently a motel. They have selected a specific property that they are interested in acquiring. They're not making that name public yet because they're still in negotiations with the seller. But we have drafted our agreement with them with some flexibility in case they do need to shift gears and find a different property to acquire. But the basic idea is to acquire property for conversion to recovery residence housing, similar to the model that True North Recovery has used in Matsu Valley and Fairbanks for several years, to try to expand that model into Anchorage. And we hope to have some specifics in the final draft that goes to HUD. Yeah.
Mr. Johnson, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. When you say acquire property, you're not talking about property that would be owned by the municipality, right?
No.
Okay. You're talking about providing funding for another entity that would actually hold the title, correct?
Yeah, through the chair to Member Johnson. Yes, that is an excellent clarification. With CDBG particularly, there are requirements on municipally owned properties that are assisted with CDBG that are particularly onerous in terms of change of use and the period during which we have to continue to use the property in the way it was funded for. So generally, we try to assist nonprofit partners with projects rather than having them being municipally owned. So the idea behind this is that we would provide funding to True North Recovery for the portion of a purchase price of a property that True North Recovery would then own.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. And before you go on, a few more people have joined us. I have Mr. McCormick and Attorney Gates has joined us as well. Thanks.
So yeah, we can go into the next slide. Okay, so then for future years, so that RFGP for the acquisition project is the one that we were able to do before we got the action plan drafted this year. In future years, we are going to try to get into an even earlier cycle so that we have more of the types of projects selected before the action plan is drafted. We didn't quite get that point this year, so there is still some TBD funding in this. I know that Assembly has pointed out in some of our past action plans that there tends to be a lot of TBD. We are working on getting projects selected before drafting the plan, but there are still some types of projects for which we don't have that yet for 2025. But in general, in the future, we'll have a series of RFGPs go out before the beginning of the program year, so probably in the fall, to select projects for housing acquisition or some sort of capital project, and then for public services projects, and select projects. Now, we wouldn't be able to actually fund those until HUD approves the action plan, which generally won't be until the summer. So there is a bit of a lead time for applicants there that they need to be aware of. But this is the general scope of the way we're going to be doing things: is put out an RFGP well in advance, select projects, put those into the action plan, and then once the action plan is approved, we'll be able to get going immediately on the projects rather than having to amend the plan.
Just Mr. Constant has joined us as well. Thanks.
Next slide. So I'm just going to go over the tables of proposed projects for each grant that we have in the action plan draft. Next slide. So for CDBG, this is basically the proposed project table. There's an administrative cut. We have our mobile home repair program through Rural Cap, which we typically fund every year. That's $400,000 for that. The acquisition with True North Recovery is $750,000. There's an activity delivery cost portion for some of our administrative costs beyond our general administrative cut that are on specific projects. The public services there, that primarily is going to be probably a solicitation of some sort. So that line is still a TBD for most of that. We do have a portion of that set aside for Rural Cap for Sitka Place case management. That we fund that every year. That was a condition of the capital funding that we put into that project. Was a conversion of a motel to housing in the kind of Mountain View area near Merrifield. We have to continue to provide some funding for there out of our public services for each year. The remainder of the public services will select one or more projects to fund. In the past, we've typically funded several small projects with public services. we may be going to fewer larger projects with that in the future. Next slide. So for home, this one does have some TBDs. We're kind of working on getting some solicitations together for these. Basically, we have an administrative cut, and then there's a specific type of organization called a Community Housing Development Organization, or CHODO, that we're required to set aside a certain amount of funding for. Currently, we only have one of those. That's Habitat for Humanity Anchorage. And so our past CHODO funding has typically gone to them. We are recruiting for additional CHODOs. And so starting with 2025 funding, we are expecting that we may actually put out a competitive solicitation among the CHODOs, if we have more than one, to allocate that funding. We also are planning to do tenant-based rental assistance. We put that on pause last year after HUD had kind of pushed back about our assessment of the need for tenant-based rental assistance, which is a required part of our con plan if we're going to do that. We had not updated ours in many years. It dated back to, I think, 2007 or 2008. And so they said we need to do an updated assessment. We have done that assessment and determined that tenant-based rental assistance is a good type of project to do in our context. So we will be doing some sort of that. Some of that will be determined based on the outcomes of the Treasury emergency rental assistance that we are currently managing, the last segment of that funding, and determining what the best targeted use of that tenant-based rental assistance might be in the future. And then we do have some funding here potentially for capital rental housing development of some sort. It's not a huge amount of money, so you know, this could be micro units or maybe a motel conversion portion of a small project like that. But we do want to continue to keep that rental housing piece in there as well on some level.
Can you just explain what tenant-based housing rental assistance?
Tenant-based rental assistance. So this is basically vouchers. It's similar to Section 8 housing. It's separate from the actual Section 8 program that's HFC managed. But basically it's rental payments on behalf of specific tenants that meet certain qualifications. And the way we've done this in the past is we've selected an operator through an RFP process and then funded the project through that operator to provide assistance to tenants. It can be structured in a variety of ways, but that's the basic idea. Thanks. Next slide. So then for ESG, which is a smaller portion, what we've done in past years and are planning to continue to do this year is, aside from the very small administrative portion of this funding, to put all of it toward the homelessness prevention program through the Aging and Disability Resource Center in the health department, and just have that be a single chunk of money that goes toward that project, which attempts to cover rental arrears and keep people out of homelessness. Next slide. So timeline, next slide here. So this just shows the basic timeline of the action plan. And this is pretty much going to be the same each year. We have a very hard deadline in August that we have to submit it to HUD by August 16th. So we did public meetings over the course of the winter and spring. Public notice of draft went out in May. Public comment period, there's a 30-day public comment period once we publish the notice of the draft. We're in the midst of that now. And then there's a public hearing that's required during that period. We had that on May 29th. After that public comment period closes, which is June 20th in this case, it'll go to the assembly for assembly approval. So that gets introduced at one assembly meeting, and then there's a public hearing at the next one. Targeting getting assembly approval at the July 15th meeting, and then submission to HUD in advance of that August 16th deadline. Next slide. So consultation, we consult with a lot of different stakeholder groups and individuals, and you know, anyone really interested in this process and how we're allocating our funding. So HAND Commission, Housing, Homelessness, and Neighborhood Development Commission meets monthly. We're always there, and we give them updates on our process. Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, the Continuum of Care, we consult with regularly, community councils, social service agencies, Lusk Housing Finance Corporation, really any other interested organization we're happy to meet with. Next slide. So a comment period for the action plan this year is from May 21st to June 20th. It's a minimum 30-day public comment period. We're in the midst of it now. Great opportunity to provide feedback. That will go through June 20th, and then it'll come to the assembly on June 24th. Next slide. So how to comment, if anyone is interested, you can email that to ahdcsdplans@anchorageak.gov, and then we've also got our mailing address up there. And we'll consider any comments that we get during that comment period in the final draft that gets submitted to HUD. Next slide. And so this is just my contact information there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Yes, Ms. Baldwin.
Mr. Droley, thank you. I have so many questions. So if I'm doing my math correctly, you're really receiving less than $5 million annually-ish from the federal government via all of these mechanisms. Is that, am I like back of napkin math? Am I kind of right?
Through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, less than that. It comes to about 3 million-ish between the three core programs. We do manage some other programs that can bump that up a little bit, but yeah, you're generally in the 2 to 3 million range.
And that entitlement funding, that's calculated on the basis of our population of the city. Is that correct?
Through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, yes, that's based on the calculation is set by statute for each of the programs separately, so it's not the same for all three programs, but generally there's a few factors that go into that, and city population is one of the main ones.
Interesting. Okay. And that's federal statute.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. A question about, I think I heard you say that you have a preference for assisting nonprofit partners with property acquisition rather than leveraging municipally owned properties because conditional use permits are a barrier, essentially.
Through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, that it's a little not quite conditional use permits per se, but basically the issue and this is specific to the CDBG funding rather than the other programs, but the basic issue is that if for all of the programs, there's a period for which the property has to be used for a use that is eligible under the grant program in question. So, for affordable housing project, it would have to be not only used for housing, but used for housing with a certain rental limits and within HUD standards. Then it's typically, and those requirements vary depending on whether it is municipally owned or non-municipally owned property, typically in the 10, 15, 20-year range. For CDBG, however, for municipally owned property, the compliance period is perpetual. So if you assist a municipally owned property with CDBG funding, that property has to be used for a CDBG compatible use forever. And if it ever changes, the city has to repay all of the CDBG funding, adjusted for inflation, and for change in the value of the property. So there's a calculation you would do if the property has appreciated a certain amount. If we put a certain amount of CDBG into there, you have to multiply it by both the general inflation and the property value, and then repay that amount of money at that point, which can be quite substantial. And we do have some older properties that are in that situation where we need to find a CDBG compatible use if the use changes. Otherwise, we'd have to repay that funding. And that funding goes into our treasury account and can be used for future CDBG projects. It counts as program income. So we don't lose it entirely, but that would come out of general fund. And so that is a cost to the city. So we generally try to avoid ending up in that situation. And so we generally prefer to avoid doing projects on municipally owned property.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the roughly $200,000 that's currently earmarked for public services that has a TBD next to it. What is the timeline for an RFPG going out for that? And do you have a sense of what those public services might be?
Through the chair to member Baldwin Day, that is a great question. I think we're aiming at probably in the fall to put that out. You know, it's one of these things where we would have preferred to get it out before we got the plan drafted, but we didn't quite have that done. I don't think we have a very clear sense yet of exactly what types of projects we would be looking for with that. What we have typically done with that funding in the past is funded things like homeless outreach, case management, legal services. Basically, the focus of that funding in recent years has generally been on homelessness response and services related to that. And I think we would still focus on that in some fashion, but we might put a more specific type of service, maybe case management or homeless outreach or you know, something a little more specific in an RFP, but that has not been determined at this point.
Gotcha. Is there any interest or appetite in allocating those funds more towards the prevention side of the equation? Perhaps doing some sort of like emergency intervention, not necessarily in terms of rental assistance, but other sorts of navigation for folks who are kind of on that razor's edge in terms of becoming homeless?
Yeah, that's certainly, you know, would be an eligible use and would certainly be something we could consider. So yes, that's definitely within the discussion.
Very cool. And then with respect to that grant making process, if an RFPG isn't going out until the fall, does the entity who receives those funds only have until the end of the calendar year to spend the funds that have been allocated to them, or does that funding extend into the next calendar year?
Great question. Through the chair to member Baldwin Day. Yes, that funding goes well beyond the calendar year. So our HUD funding generally is multi-year funding. It's not tied to any particular fiscal year. There is a period within which it has to be spent, but that's on the order of like 6 to 8 years from the time that the HUD grant agreement is signed. So particularly for CDBG funding, I think it's 6 years. That it's good for several years. So we are actually still spending down past year's funding rather than even the 2024 funding at this point. So we have some time basically. There's not a ticking clock toward the end of the year for someone who would be selected, and that's part of why you know we are able to wait a little bit to put that RFP out, because it's not gonna, the money's not gonna expire soon. It does eventually expire, but not soon.
And I think you started to answer my next question, which is what happens to funding that isn't actually allocated in fiscal year 2025?
Yeah, so you know, funding that it isn't allocated, you know, all the funding will need to be allocated for HUD to approve the action plan. It doesn't have to be spent for a few years. And so if it comes to a point where we haven't spent money and we get to the actual expiration date that's like 6 or 8 years out, and this happens actually more with ESG, which is a 2-year period. If we haven't spent it all, then we do need to give the remainder back. And so it is possible to not spend the money and lose out on it in the end. So we do try to allocate it to projects that we are pretty certain will spend it, so that we don't end up in that situation where we are at risk of losing out on funds.
So one follow-up question to that: when you say allocated, that means that you have a project generally in mind, but not necessarily a grantee or a provider or something.
Yeah, so like in these tables, even the ones that say TBD, that would be considered an allocation from HUD's perspective, because we've designated what type of project we're going to do with it. When we select a specific project, generally we have to do a substantial amendment to the plan, and so there's a public process with that takes a couple months usually. But yeah, allocation from HUD's perspective is just saying what we're going to do with it, not necessarily the specifics of the project.
Great. I have a lot more questions, but I have just hogged the floor for at least 5 minutes, so I'm going to yield to other members. Thank you very much.
don't actually see other members in the queue at this point. I have a couple of questions just for you. You mentioned that there was a change in your approach, that you are looking at fewer projects and bigger projects. And you are focusing your projects on what you see as the priorities. I'm curious in this plan that I don't necessarily see priorities. I'm wondering where your priorities are coming from, how you've determined those are the priorities, and then what that looks like in terms of bigger and fewer. What's that look like? Does that mean fewer organizations are going to receive money and people will get larger grants? Can you just give us a sense of what that strategy change is going to look like?
Yeah, great question. First, in theory, like the process that is supposed to be used to determine that sort of prioritization is the consolidated plan process. And so the goals that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that's really what's supposed to determine how we're doing priorities. So you can see from the actual goals we have in there, those are pretty broad and they cover like a wide range of things. So they don't really focus in on the type of prioritization that we're like in practice mostly looking at. And that's one of the reasons that we are looking at potentially amending the con plan to specify more clearly what our priorities are and get input from the public on that, so that it's an open process to determine what those are. So that's kind of how it should work and how we will approach it, kind of to specify more clearly how we're doing that prioritization. In terms of fewer but larger projects, yeah, I mean, it would basically mean fewer organizations getting grants, but the grants would be larger, could potentially fund either a higher level of service or, if it's a capital project, a larger project. Basically, the issue we have is that in the entire scope of the issues that we work on, our pots of funding are quite small. And what we've often done in the past is divided that small pot of funding even further and spread it to a range of different grantees and recipients, but in very small quantities that don't go very far, don't serve very many people ultimately. And so what we looking at trying to do is doing fewer projects, and then additionally, just we're a small team, and each project takes the same amount of work basically. So if we do 10 projects for $10,000 each, that's 10 times as much work as one project for 100,000. And so we are looking toward more efficient use of the funds to fund larger projects, even like it's rare that we would be able probably to fund like an entire capital project. So really we'd be looking at leveraging our funds with other funding sources to get larger projects in place, particularly things like hotel conversions or new housing, and use ours in a way that advances our goals in a more efficient way, basically.
Thanks. Mr. Constant.
Thanks. So you give us a little bit of detail on the RFP selected grantee True North. Can you brief us a little bit more on what that project is going to be?
It's through Chair, the member Constant. That is basically going to be similar to their recovery residence model that they've done in the Valley in Fairbanks, where they would have a facility, in this case, probably a converted motel that would have people living there, receiving substance misuse treatment, and there's certain like levels of treatment and so forth that they would determine what exactly was the level of treatment they do based on the facility they have. But yeah, that's basically, it's the kind of their established recovery residence model.
So I'll just declare that I do provide work for a provider of treatment services that kind of competes in this space. We did not compete for this, so I'm very comfortable talking about it. Now, this isn't related to the Golden Lion.
No.
And did I hear you say, like, kind of in the commercial section between Mountain View and Fairview?
No, the particular property that they're talking about here would not be. I think that was referring to the Sitka place. That's an existing property.
Gotcha. So now I just want to underscore what I'm hearing is that the administration is proposing to the assembly to fund addiction services related to housing homeless people.
Yeah, I'm,
Okay, this is, I guess some people might need to hear that again a time or two, but this is an ongoing effort to establish broad, complex services to meet the needs of the people who are out there. And so I hear this kind of story out in the public that is, you need to fund treatment, not housing. I'm like, no, we need to do all of it as much as we can. And this is an example. Thank you.
You have another question, Ms. Belwinde?
What else is new?
Go for it.
Yeah, coming back, I think coming back to Member Perez Verdia's question, based on, what I'm seeing here, you have 10 goals identified, 4 areas of priority need, and only $3 million to work with. So I'm curious, is there a plan to create a little more specificity or to potentially map the landscape of what else is already offered in Anchorage and to start to be more strategic about how these funds get allocated? Because as I'm looking, each one of these goals could take a $3 million influx of funds. So, so I think in terms of biggest bang for the buck, what does that process look like from the health department's perspective to really get a little more focused or a little more targeted in how these dollars are being invested in the community?
Through the chair to Member Baldwin Day, I think, for our perspective, and the administration may have something to say on this as well, that what we'd be looking at is probably amending our consolidated plan and doing a process to kind of determine what really are the highest priority needs. Part of why there are so many goals in there is kind of an administrative thing on the HUD side, in that if we want to do a project in one of our action plans, it has to meet one of the goals that's identified in our con plan. So if something were to come up unexpectedly that seems like a good project we want to fund, but it falls into a category that's not identified as a goal, then we wouldn't be able to do it without amending the con plan. So the reason that those goals have proliferated so much is, on one hand, that people wanted to maintain a lot of flexibility in the types of projects that they did in the past. But like you say, it's not that much money. And so I think my kind of general strategic direction on this is to try to be more specific about the goals that we're trying to meet, because there's just no way that we can meet all these goals with this money. And so for looking at our little pot of money here, amending our con plan to further specify the goals that we're going to focus on is the procedural answer to your question. In terms of coordinating with other, seeing what else is going on and coordinating better with others, that's also something that's going to be an ongoing effort and focus. And I think comment on that.
Yeah, through the chair, Member Baldwin Day, I think just understanding kind of like how these plans this is a big picture plan. And then we have, as you know, much more specific strategies around homelessness and health and housing. So since Mayor LaFrance came into office, we've been working really closely with multiple different parts of the health department, because there's different funding sources that are managed through different areas. And this is the one that the team that Jen leads manages. And so our goal is really to use this type of funding to leverage our other municipal sources towards the same goals and ends, which are, I think, most clearly articulated right now in the homelessness and health and the 10,000 home strategy.
Thanks. And I know you have more questions. I want to move on if I can, but yes, Mr. Constant.
Yeah, just really briefly before we move on, Jed, by the nature of the question, there were at least 3 questions about what are the priorities, and you have the big stack of priorities that we have in the comprehensive plan. And so what I would suggest in the future might be take each of these projects that you're proposing for funding and add a slide beforehand that says our priorities for this include mobile home repair, which will keep people housed, recovery housing, which is a missing need, case management and other services to make sure that people who are in supports or in a housing environment are supported, because it's all really here. It's just not handed to us in a very crystalline way. And so I think you could grasp the priorities for 2025 right on the page where you fund it, because the old adage is your budget is your values.
To the chair, member Costa, thank you. That's great feedback, and we'll work on putting the slide together like that.
Thanks. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next item.
Good morning. We will go over a quick overview of designated overnight parking. If you do not have a copy, I can grab one for you. Otherwise, they are on the table right there. So I am happy to have an opportunity to present on designated parking. It has been on our strategy document for the last 9 months, and we are finally at a point where we are going to see our pilot move forward. The purpose of designated overnight parking is to provide a structured, service-oriented alternative to unsanctioned vehicle camping. This pilot offers safe, legal, and supervised environment where individuals experiencing homelessness who live in their vehicles can park safely. It is, and I will repeat, a pilot project that will give us an opportunity to really see, did we have individuals that were interested and willing to utilize the service, and did the service meet the need? The project will operate seasonally from 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. starting July 1 through September 30th. It is important to know that utilizing a designated parking program is not something that's new and novel to Anchorage. We see this service operated in the lower 48 for a number of years. Typically, designated parking is something that's offered 24/7 year-round. But unlike our lower 48 partners, we have very harsh winter conditions that don't allow us to operate that service in the same way. Additionally, we want to be incredibly responsible when we think about designated parking. A 24-hour setup, like in many cities, has a level of intensive engagement and support from providers. As a pilot, we want to ensure that we are providing a reasonable amount of time to give individuals a place to be and connect to services, and 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. allows for individuals that are typically working to get off work, utilize some of our typical service providers that close between 4 and 5 p.m., and then to find themselves very safely in one of our designated parking sites between, again, 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. I really want to emphasize that as we are talking about designated parking, many of us think about what we saw in years past, particularly 2 summers ago, where there was just a significant amount of car campers that literally turned into caravans moving around the city. Designated parking is a structured program that requires individuals to be permitted. That permit is issued through the Anchorage Health Department. Individuals have to have a driver's license, registration, and insurance. That means that the types of individuals and vehicles that we saw last 2 summers ago, as well as those that are often associated with cars we see at Davis Park, are not the types of vehicles that you are going to see at designated parking. Those are not individuals that are interested in going through a permit process and turning over their insurance and driver's license information to the health department. In thinking about this service, we know that we have an undercounted number of families and individuals that are experiencing homelessness that often represent individuals that are in high school, who don't want people to know that they're experiencing homelessness, who need a safe place to go, women with children that often are still employed and using day services, childcare that spends down between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then where do they go safely? We also know that we have an increasing number of fathers and families that are experiencing homelessness when our services like emergency cold weather shelters spin down, McKinnell family shelters are full. Where do these individuals go? We want to provide that safe landing place that is not only safe and secure for our community, wherever the service is located, but it's safe and secure for the individuals that we are providing services for. Individuals that would be in the current designated parking is open as a request for proposal. The proposal final due date, submissions have to be received by June 26th. That is posted on the purchasing website that gives you a full breadth and scope of the service provision as well as the policies and procedures. Designated overnight parking, again, is a structured program that does not allow individuals to use illicit drugs. It is, again, a permitted process. We want to ensure that individuals who are working, who may work on traditional hours, someone may finish employment at midnight, has the opportunity to still come into designated parking, but individuals can't just simply drive in and out. Again, an individual with a permit who has submitted all of that information is highly unlikely to come in and out of a service. It is supervised and monitored through the current request for proposal where we are seeking a vendor with location or a location only. Site supervision requires a minimum of two staff to supervise the site per 50 vehicles. A minimum bidder can provide a site for 25 vehicles. And then based on capacity, if we have an overwhelming number of individuals that submit applications for designated parking based on the vendor's ability to provide additional support, the site location's ability to accommodate up to 50 vehicles, and the authorization of the health department director, we can expand capacity up to 50 vehicles, but we are soliciting for a minimum of 25 vehicles per site. We would like to have 2 sites available for designated parking, recognizing that if we do have individuals that are engaging in the service, we want to have capacity to meet the need. Designated parking is really also in response to feedback that we received from APD with where can they safely direct individuals to go. Right now, if someone is sleeping in their car, they can park at any of our shelter locations, but they must participate in shelter. That's a bit of a deal breaker if I have minors, because our community operated shelters do not serve individuals with children. And if I'm 17 years old and still in school, I don't want to be in our shelter that has capacity for 200 people. It feels incredibly uncomfortable as a person that doesn't want other individuals to know that I am experiencing homelessness. So we want to be very thoughtful about A, community impact, and B, are we truly meeting the need of the individuals that we seek to serve? For vehicles that do not choose to engage in designated parking for a variety of different reasons, that allows the Anchorage Police Department to understand who they should be engaging in traffic stops. If you have a vehicle that is not roadworthy, that doesn't have registration, those are the vehicles that will be engaged if they are just parked in your community, if they are parked in right-of-ways where there is no parking allowed. Location and capacity. I've already stated that we are looking at a minimum of 25 vehicles per location in our current solicitation. No final location has been selected. Through the proposal process, we anticipate having a vendor or vendors. So if you're still interested, the proposal is open to bring forward sites that will help determine where the final location will be selected. Again, each site will have a minimum of 25 vehicles, maximum capacity for 50 based on a need for that, on the number of permits that we've received, site readiness, and site capacity. Addressing community concerns. We have had some early feedback where the community really wants to ensure any service that we're providing is not going to bring and for any part of our communities, there's always a concern when we think about service provision. What we have been very diligent about is ensuring that we have a good neighbor policy built into our proposal that allows for the community to have that engagement and an accountability and ongoing dialogue with the vendor providing the service. We want to ensure that if there are community concerns about vehicles that are not leaving the area, vehicles that are hanging around in the area, that there is a clearly articulated plan for how that will be engaged. Again, the vendor is required to provide site security. So it is not the responsibility of APD that they will be patrolling the area. That is a part of the overall solicitation. Business outreach is underway, and I will be engaging in community council meetings to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to fully hear and understand that this is a structured, monitored, and supervised program. Designated parking does not allow tent camping. It is really meant to ensure site safety and security. It is not sanctioned camping. The municipality does not offer any sanctioned camping. I will be intentionally redundant. We know that there is a unseen group of individuals that are experiencing homelessness that are car campers, that we want a safe place for those individuals to be. Program oversight. The Anchorage Health Department will have oversight of the contractor offering this service. They will closely monitor their adherence to all policies and procedures and responsibilities of the proposal and the contract, as well as offer and be a secondary point of contact for the community if there are concerns with the service. Our vendor that offers designated parking will be required to submit data on the number of individuals that they serve, the overall kind of composition of who is being served. So if we have a number of permits that are issued for one person vehicle, or if that vehicle is serving a family unit, it gives us better data to understand how do we strategically identify and utilize services. I appreciate Member Constant's statement. We have a broader strategy, and this is just one component of that. The data that we have from each of our programs really helps to align how we use resources and are we meeting the need. We've had a lot of community questions. How do we minimize that impact? Again, I want to identify that there are clear site rules, there's security, and sanitation is critically important. We want to have a very small footprint for this service. Access to restrooms, sanitation are critically important, that if I'm experiencing homelessness, it's difficult to find a place to just use the bathroom if I have children. Being able to, again, have that sense of security, being unseen, and just a level of dignity and respect that we often don't think about when someone is experiencing homelessness. Who is the service meant to serve? Again, I've really articulated for you that there are a number of people that are experiencing homelessness that live in their vehicles that don't have a touch point in the system. Typically, if individuals are still working, if I am a mom with children, they are not necessarily engaging with our behavioral health service providers, our outreach providers, or your traditional homeless service providers, because they don't want to be unseen. They don't want to have contact with Office of Children's Services. If I'm in high school or I'm a transition age youth and I'm still working, I don't want everyone to know that I'm experiencing homelessness. This allows us to, again, to have a level of respect where we can support them through access to case management, but also ensure that they have that sense of safety and security through our designated parking, where they can continue to be engaged and productive member of the community without having that title of experiencing homelessness, because it does bring a sense of, for many people, shame that they've done something wrong. And this is our opportunity, again, as a community, to come together and connect people to a safe place to be with services that ensure security. Who will manage the site? The site vendor, again, will have operational support and oversight through the Anchorage Health Department. A minimum of 2 site security will be there. There is a good neighbor policy to ensure there's engagement, and there's data reporting so that we genuinely understand, as a pilot project, is this something that we can move forward? How many people are allowed per vehicle? Each individual, the vehicle operator has to submit a permit. And from there, they'll work with the Anchorage Health Department to ensure that everyone that is residing in the vehicle is included on the permit. And we do recognize that there will often be family units associated with that. So yes, minors will be allowed on site. Can people afford insurance or registration? We want to make sure that those that are interested in using designated parking but don't have insurance or funds for insurance or registration are connected to our health department, where we can link them to service providers that can offer this resource. Because again, we don't want to create a barrier for individuals that would like to use the service, but we also are not going to create an opportunity for differential enforcement of the law. If I am a vehicle on the road, I am required to have a driver's license, insurance, and registration, or else I am subject to enforcement. So we are not creating separate enforcement rules for individuals that would use our site. Again, I've already stated it's a drug and alcohol-free program. And I want to say this, I've had this question several times, just very randomly come up. What happens if people get out of control? Typically, if I've given you my driver's license and my insurance and we have your license plate number, if you get out of control and you're asked to leave the designated parking site, that information is immediately going to be reported back to the Anchorage Police. And so that is not generally a concern for us because it is a supervised and secured site. And the type of person that provides their driver's license is typically not going to become unmanageable. So with that, I will pause to see if there are any questions from the membership.
I do have some questions. Mr. Decker, you first, and then Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time to brief us on this. I have a handful of questions for you. I can run them rapid fire here. You just said you don't think people tend to become unruly if they've provided a driver's license, but what if they don't want to leave in the morning? Are you going to have the vehicle towed, or what's the plan there?
That is correct. In the policies and procedures, the operator is required to have a contract for towing, and the site operator would be responsible for having the vehicle towed. If it's an issue where the vehicle is broken down, that's why we have case management assigned to the project to ensure that we're helping to link those individuals, and it's something that we fully recognize as a possibility.
Okay. You talked about eligibility requirements, including having a valid driver's license, insurance, and vehicle registration. Is that it?
Yes.
So there's no criminal background check for folks utilizing these sanctioned camps, lots?
Designated camping?
Yeah.
Correct. We do not do background checks.
Okay. So somebody could come to this lot with maybe a violent criminal history, maybe even an active warrant, and they could stay at our sanctioned lot right next to women and children?
Designated camping, and again, designated parking, thank you. We do want to have as low a barrier as possible for individuals that are coming in, and a background check is not required. And so to your question, yes, without knowing an individual's background, that would be a possibility. But I want to emphasize that this is not individuals that are tent camping. They're in their vehicle, and it is a supervised site.
Sure. Service proximity, can you define what that means?
So we want to think about when, and this would just be as a part of when we're evaluating the proposals.
Mhm.
So where is their service saturation? Are they near where we can provide additional linkage or support? So it's just a part of the consideration when we think about the locations for designated parking, and also in mind with the proposals that will come forward.
Yeah. Can you define, is there a mile? Like this many miles from the nearest hospital or center or shelter?
Nope, we do not have a strict mileage radius, but it's just something that we would consider as we're evaluating the proposals that come through.
Right. So any lot throughout the entire municipality, Girdwood to Clutna, could be included in that.
For the site evaluation, through the chair, Member Goker, through our evaluation for site locations, we looked at B3 PLI and municipal right-of-way. So that was a look at the entire city.
Appreciate the answers so far. I do have a couple more questions, if I may, Mr. Chair. Now, what if you have a vehicle that is operable when they come in, but it becomes inoperable? At that point, would it then be towed?
We would work with the operator as well as the site operator would work with the vehicle owner, because that's where our case management comes in. Could we help them have the vehicle towed to a repair shop and then have funds available to help support that repair? Because again, this is really an opportunity to connect people and not to punish them.
Yeah. And who pays? Whose funds are those?
That is the intent of case management, is to link to a variety of different funding resources. And this is something that we would also be looking at as a part of the proposal, is how they identify the utilization of case management.
Now, you said that drugs and alcohol are not going to be permitted.
Correct.
We'll have staff on site from whatever vendors, are given the award. So if they see somebody doing drugs or alcohol in the parking lot, do they then call APD, and will APD then show up and arrest them and remove them? How's that going to work?
So that would be an enforcement issue, just like anywhere, if you saw someone using drugs in the Walmart parking lot or here in the Muni parking lot, we would contact APD.
Right.
Our vendors do not have enforcement authority, and we do not want them trying to enforce on individuals. We would ask them to follow the same protocols that you would anywhere else. I did not state this, but search is a part of for individuals that would be participating, they have to consent to a vehicle search.
Right. Okay. I guess that maybe gets to maybe the overall concern that there's that drugs and alcohol, there's a lot of drugs and public drug and alcohol use happening citywide right now. And it doesn't seem like there's any actual enforcement happening anywhere in this town. So why should locals in an area where this is being contemplated, why should they feel confident that this is going to be any different?
I appreciate the question and the concern. I will push back very gently and say that I absolutely know that our APD officers are enforcing, because I happen to work very closely with APD and see this. But this is absolutely why we want to have programs like this, because it allows APD to have a clear target of who there should be enforcement on, where there should be engagement. Individuals that are utilizing our designated parking, if someone is not following the rules, our vendor will contact APD as appropriate, and based on what that officer finds, if it's something that's arrestable, then that's an enforcement component for APD. And I want to be very clear with the community in general, wherever these locations are, our vendors are not police, and we are going to be very clear that enforcement is not their purview. But in understanding, yes, you may have one bad apple, but if I'm submitting a driver's license and a registration, it is highly unlikely that I am the type of person that is going to show up and then have a party in my vehicle.
I have a number of other folks in the queue.
Yeah, I guess I'll listen with a comment then, is that it's concerning that we don't have that we're not going to have a mechanism in place to make sure that this is not turned into a crime law. Because if you've got people that they don't have to do a criminal background check, they could have active warrants for their arrest. We're going to sanction them to stay potentially in a vehicle right next to vulnerable women and children is concerning.
Can I just add one thing to that question, Chair?
Go ahead.
Through the chair. So in the RFP that's posted right now, there's also a set of policies and procedures for the program that any vendor would have to comply with. And if you go to page 6 of that document, you'll see lists of both minor violations and major violations. The use of alcohol, illegal drugs, or mood altering substances on site is considered a major violation, which would result in an immediate removal and trespass filing. And then for some of the minor violations, those would be considered, once you have 3 of those, you'd be resulting removal. So I think reviewing these policies and procedures would actually answer some of the questions that you're asking.
Yeah, just if I may, just push back very gently on that. That's after they're already in. This isn't this. What I'm saying is we should have a criminal background check before these people are even allowed to park in these areas. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're gonna move on. Ms. Johnson.
Quick question. I think, is this contract going to come before the assembly for approval?
That is correct.
Okay, but you say proposals are due June 26th, but the intent is to have this operational by July 1st. Are we planning a special meeting, or what are you thinking to actually roll this out? Because our next regular assembly meeting is several weeks after you're talking about moving forward.
Chair, Member Johnson, July 1 was incredibly optimistic. June 26th is when the proposals close. They still have to go through purchasing and then through an evaluation committee. So July 1 is still our operational period, but we will not have a signed contract as of July 1. And I appreciate you calling that out.
So the expectation is that we will see this on the agenda for our first regular meeting in July?
Optimistically, that is correct, July 15th.
Okay. I mean, if we miss that and we don't get it until the end of July, I mean, we're talking about a very narrow operational period, which is, I guess, is to just, I understand there's a lot of moving pieces here, but something to keep in mind. So thank you.
Ms. Baldwin.
Yeah, question just clarifying about Muni operated shelters with respect to parking. So anyone can currently park in the parking lot of a Muni operated shelter as long as they are not a minor and as long as they are engaging with the shelter. Is that correct?
Correct, as long as they are And if, as long as they are staying in the shelter, so if it's congregate or non-congregate, yes, they have the ability to park at any of the muni operated shelter locations.
Okay, thank you. And then what is the definition of minor? Like can minors use the location? I am thinking about 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are living out of their car. Are they permitted to stay independently, or is that a non-starter?
Member Baldwin Day, I will follow up with you on that.
Thank you. And then one additional question. So the permitting process that you outlined, this actually requires people to come in person to the health department, present license, registration, and proof of insurance, and be permitted like there prior to arrival at the sanctioned camping. Is that kind of the order of operations? Or sanctioned parking, excuse me?
Yes, they would have to come in and complete all that paperwork before they were allowed into the spot.
Okay.
We have also added a provision that allows APD to direct individuals to designated parking because again, they often have contact with people that are sleeping unsafely and unsafe locations. If a vehicle is directed to designated parking by APD, they have 72 hours to go through the permit process. But they will be allowed at the site that evening.
Gotcha. And then I think just potentially a suggestion for that TBD public services, $213,440 that the health department currently has. Maybe that would be an appropriate thing to earmark for assistance with licensing, registration, insurance, that sort of thing. Just a thought.
Thanks, Mr. Costa.
Yeah, thanks. A couple things. So should the review process be completed sometime between the 1st and the 15th with enough notice, 24 hours, 48 hours, we could probably schedule a special meeting. And so I would put that out there that it is possible if we can get 7 of us in a room that we could proceed forward if the reviews are completed. I want to push in a little bit to Mr. Rucker's point about kind of safety. And I think that, you know, the idea is 1 or more locations. And so I think you will have some challenges even finding people who can meet all of the barriers, the insurance, you know, the registered car, all of that stuff. And so I think it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to have enough that you're going to need 2 sites right away, but maybe it won't. And so if one finds that there is kind of enough use of people qualified, then it might make sense to subdivide the communities a little bit for which locations. And so folks with families in one place versus the general public. And so I think if you do find yourself in that position, you know, the idea of a background check is, you know, who wouldn't want to do that other than the fact it takes 60 to 90 days with the state and it takes money. And so we may not be able to get to that if we're going to try to do this in a kind of an efficient manner. But I think there are ways to look at the populations to ensure that we don't generally populate the same location with people whose interests are very different. And so I would say, think that through and maybe even in kind of inviting people in. And when you get close, talk about the potential of alternative locations being identified once we have ample capacity and ample users so that people are aware that it might not be so that we can kind of ensure safety is a primary protocol in the process. And so I believe you have the ability, skills, and tools to do that. So thank you.
Thanks. I think we're going to try to move on unless anybody has any other questions. Thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your updates today. As I mentioned in the beginning of the meeting, we're making a little bit of an adjustment. Daniel, is Daniel here? Who's going to do the presentation on mobile dwelling units? Yeah, come on up. And I'm going to ask you to be as concise as you can, knowing we've got a tight meeting schedule. All right. You could introduce yourself for the record and then you can begin whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Daniel McKenna Foster. I'm Long Range Planning Manager for the Planning Department. I'm just going to give a quick overview of a case that was discussed, the Planning and Zoning Commission discussed on the 9th last week or so on mobile dwelling units. So this project went through agency review, then we got some comments, we expanded the proposal, and then we got even more comments, and so we went a little bit further. So let's see, I'm not sure if I'm in control of this. So I'll skip through this. If you would, please. Okay.
Travis, is this?
Oh, Travis is doing it. Oh, okay. Can you, yeah. So basically this all started a couple of years ago. The assembly directed us to look at mobile dwelling units or manufactured housing feasibility. Long story short, we commissioned a report and we found that manufactured housing communities are no longer really feasible, at least as traditionally constituted in the municipality. So we started looking at other options. Next slide, please. In here, this report, it's published online. You can see what the consultant came up with. It's just really difficult to get manufactured housing up here. It's really complicated to do a new park. It's complicated to do infrastructure. There are a lot of restrictions on landscaping, aesthetics, and driveways, and it just seemed really costly. So that housing type, as we've traditionally imagined it, may no longer be viable. Next slide, please. Again, yeah, basically the consultant found that if you're building a mobile home park at that, or manufactured housing park at that point, you might as well just, it's comparable to moving into a townhome. So it doesn't really make much sense anymore. Next slide, please. So we've been looking at what the code currently allows for kind of small forms of housing. Everything here that's in green is something that can probably be permitted. A lot of this depends on sort of the nuances of the site and what the building department will allow. Next slide, please. What we're kind of trying to move to is a little more flexibility about what would be permitted or permittable. And really the shift here is getting away from use types and more towards, if the building official can certify it as safe for occupancy, then somebody can live in it, rather than saying it's this type or not this type. Next slide, please. There's a lot of plan guidance to support changing or making it more accessible for manufactured housing or mobile housing, going back to the 2020 plan. So this, this has been an issue for many, many years. Every manufactured housing park in Anchorage is 40 or 50 years old or older. So it's an issue we've needed to deal with for a long time. Next slide, please. This was a couple days before the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. There was a fire in one of the mobile home parks. Currently, the code says you cannot replace one of these with anything but a mobile home. So our study showed that it's really hard to get mobile homes or manufactured homes up here. You can't replace it with anything but a mobile home or manufactured home that fits in there. So if your house burns down and you're in this situation, everybody's in a really hard spot with where to go. And there's not that much housing that would meet this sort of, sort of economic level. So it's a big conundrum. Next slide, please. So again, PZC case 2025-45. I encourage everybody to look it up. It was at the last Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, or I think it was on the 9th. And you can see the discussion, some good discussion on there. The PZC did recommend it for approval. It'll go to the assembly in a couple of weeks. And so I want to emphasize, I'm sure there will be a lot of discussion about this, so we're available to answer questions or provide information. Next slide, please. This is the most important change that proposal offers. Is one, it would allow a mobile dwelling unit. So if it's changing the definition, so there's no longer a manufactured home or modular home or mobile home. Now we're saying there's a mobile dwelling unit, so something that can be built and moved or not. It would allow that in all residential. It's permitted in all residential zones. That doesn't mean you can put a manufactured housing park in R1. It just means you can place a mobile dwelling unit if something's certified for safe occupancy in any of those zones. It changes where a manufactured dwelling park community, mobile dwelling unit community can be placed. It just changes the process for approving that from conditional use to site plan review. And it allows, and this is sort of the third part that was the big expansion. It allows mobile dwelling units, mobile dwelling communities in PLI zone and habilitative care, both sizes, and transitional living as permitted uses in PLI. And that came out of a lot of these other discussions we're having with the mayor's office about, as we're looking for a site, many times there's a good site, but the zoning isn't right. Or within the timeline, say, well, if you go through that, that's another 3 months, that's a conditional use, and then that site sort of falls out. So that's thinking ahead, but those will be big discussions. So I want to emphasize, anybody interested in that, do pay attention to that. Next slide, please. This is the site we've been kind of looking at for the recovery residences, working with the mayor's office. And so here's kind of what we're looking at, right? We have one site over at Tudor, but there's 3 different areas. There's B3SL zoning, there's PLI zoning, and there's right of way. even though it's all within 100 feet of each other, each one of those has a different set of rules about it. So the intent of this was to make it a little bit easier if you're working on a site like this to say, let's remove some of those obstacles because there will be so many other obstacles. Getting infrastructure, getting access, making sure it's safe, making sure buses can go through. So this piece is sort of removing or opening the discussion for removing some of those obstacles. Next slide, please. So questions, I have pictures of examples later, but I'd be glad to answer questions if any, please.
Thanks. And is there an intention to extend the meeting by 15 minutes just so we can try to get through it all? Okay, seeing none, meeting has been extended to 12:45. Mr. Constant, you have a question?
Couple things. Just want to clarify, under the R1 changes that would allow these, that doesn't overrule an HOA, right? HOA rules would still guide.
Through the chair, correct. The zoning never overrules HOA. So HOAs can always make more restrictive
Yeah,
rules. if they
just
wish.
want that to be here. So in those neighborhoods that are kind of planned and organized, this doesn't mean tiny homes would be coming to a neighborhood near you. So, okay.
Mr. Constant, I think Ms. Bennett, yeah, okay, great. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
okay.
ahead.
So that was, I think, I just want to be really clear about that because it sounded like if you did this change, then they would be everywhere. That's not the point. The point is they would be allowable if they are developable.
Yes. Go for it. Ms. Bennett.
I just wanted to add to what Daniel presented, that as we work on, I mean, kind of going back to Member Baldwin Day's comment about sort of what are our priorities, what's our strategy. So as we try and achieve our goals related to people who are currently homeless or experiencing homelessness, we all know one of the massive barriers is there's a real shortage of units for them to move into. So we've done some good work in terms of hotel conversions, creating rentals that are affordable for people with very low incomes. This seems a little wonky, but this is a really key piece to us being able to create locations that could be tiny home developments, could be other types of housing. My parents moved here in 1973 when I was 6 months old. When I was growing up, there were tons of trailer parks and they were still pretty nice. And that was the way that new families moved into this community. If you really dig in on what Daniel just presented, over my lifetime, we have completely eliminated that possibility for people. So it just means that we haven't created that starter home for folks, and we need to do that. So this is one of the main tools. I just want to emphasize that if we want to have fewer people experiencing homelessness, we have to have more affordable ways for them to get into housing.
Thanks. Ms. Baldwin Day.
Yeah, actually, Miss Agnew-Bembem made the point that I was going to make, which was, this isn't just about an intervention for homelessness or for residential behavioral health care. This really is a pathway for us to have more housing units in our town that are accessible to young professionals, that are accessible to couples who perhaps cannot afford the median price of a home in Anchorage, Alaska. And this provides another pathway in that direction. And I think it's really important to keep that housing supply question at the center of this conversation. That's one of the reasons I really appreciate this particular move. I think it's so important. Again, really wonky, but I think a game changer in terms of what we're able to build here in Anchorage. I think it's so important. So thank you, Daniel.
Thanks. Yes, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, thanks. And in this proposal to move it to sort of mobile dwelling units permitted across all the different residential zones, we're not changing any of the other rules that come with those residential zoning requirements, right? Like the setback requirements and the density calculations, all that remains the same, or are we also making changes there?
Through the chair, yeah, it just allows that type as there. So you could, the lot size minimum would still be the same, the lot coverage, the dimensional standards like setbacks and height would still be the same. It just, now that could be placed in that as another housing type.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Constant.
Thanks. Daniel, you offhandedly said something very quickly. The cost of a townhome is the same or maybe even less than some of these modular or small products. Can you just speak briefly about that? Because a lot of folks come up with this idea, we should allow tiny homes everywhere. We should buy tiny homes, but sometimes the cost of a tiny home exceeds the cost of an actual housing unit that is 4 walls within.
Yeah, through the chair, thanks for giving me a chance to clarify that because I probably did gloss over it a bit quickly. That comes from the Manufactured Housing Community Feasibility Report, where they found that basically if you were trying to develop a new one, and the idea was initially maybe that the Muni would look into what if we developed a manufactured housing park, that the costs for to build it would be so high that at the end you would be trying to recoup that. You'd be trying to look at a cost of that was comparable to somebody on the market. They could either get this new manufactured home on this spot, or they could find maybe a 10 or 20-year-old townhouse. So it just showed that it was no longer providing that that sort of attainable piece of housing at that segment of the market. And so just from the user perspective, looking at that, they say, I can move into a brand new manufactured home, or I could move into an older townhome. And so traditionally, I don't think that was the case. I think the manufactured home was always going to be the cheaper, more attainable option. But it's in the manufacturer. If you Google Anchorage manufactured housing feasibility report, they outline that and the details of that.
I don't think it's so new in Anchorage. I think the phenomenon where the pricing of a tiny home relative to the cost of a townhome in Anchorage has almost, at least for the last 10 or 15 years, been in that place where it's more expensive to develop a tiny home than to develop kind of a condo situation. So maybe not new here, maybe new elsewhere, but it is something to contemplate when the cost benefit analysis. These aren't those. What you're proposing, these are smaller even than that.
We're trying to solve that problem that
Right.
you're describing, just to be
Right.
clear.
I get that.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so, but when we have a broader conversation about modular homes, mobile homes, et cetera, there's just a tension there that we have to address.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Yeah, you have anything else you want to add?
Just to put a point on that, in the report, it says new mobile home communities would likely not be able to provide housing units for sale at rates much below what is currently available in the condominium or townhouse market. So it'd be a newly developed MHC would be between 226,000 and 332,000 based on the cost of purchasing and transporting units. So that's on page 1 of the report. I recommend everybody look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, we have one more item on the agenda, and I'm assuming there's going to be some people in the audience who want to speak, so we'll try to accommodate as many as we can. But what I would like to do here is I'd like to have one of the sponsors just very briefly introduce this. Again, I think we have copies of it here. And then I would like to hear from both Chief Case, who looks like he's about to move over, great, and also Eva Gardner.
Mr.
Just
Chair,
in terms,
before folks leave, can I just ask for 1 minute?
sure. Go
Hey,
ahead.
before you go at the, and I know, but I just want to speak briefly to the abatement that happened yesterday, the difficult circumstances, the amazing dynamic of the municipal workforce, the leadership of the mayor's office, special assistants, APD, the police chief, the fire chief, the entire municipal infrastructure, the Department of Law showed up and did something that needed happening. It was very difficult and it was done professionally. And it's worth saying very publicly out loud right now, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Okay, so as I said, we're a brief introduction by the sponsor, and then would love to hear some thoughts in terms of what this looks like in action from the police chief, and then any legal issues that we need to just be aware of at this point. We don't have a lot of time to discuss it, so there'll be more opportunities over the next few weeks to discuss this in a variety of meetings. But let's see if we can get through a short bit here. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
I'm happy to introduce it. Can you hear me? Oh,
Yes, Mr. McCormick, go ahead.
gotcha. Okay. Introducing AO 2025-74, the prohibited camping ordinance. This proposal will make it a Class B misdemeanor to camp on public property without permission. That includes parks, trails, medians, and other public spaces. This ordinance is in response to the growing number of unmanaged encampments across Anchorage that are unsafe, unsanitary, and unsustainable. It's written to comply with the recent Supreme Court ruling, Grant Pass v. Johnson, which will allow the city to enforce camping laws and target not status, but conduct. The goal is not punishment, it is to create clear boundaries in our public spaces and connect people to treatment and services through structured engagement. This gives our first responders like the MIT team, the MCT team, the legal foundation, they need to intervene before another person dies of drug overdose in a tent alongside of our streets, before more women are sexually assaulted and preyed upon on our streets, or as we saw yesterday at Davis Park, a devastating fire ravages our community. So I'm interested in getting this forward and talking more about it on the June 24th meeting.
Thank you, Mr. McCormick. I'm sorry, you're breaking up a little bit, but I think we got most of it. Okay, I'm gonna start the queue after we give a chance for Chief Case and Ms. Carter to speak. Would you like to go ahead and begin? So the question is really just, I think for me, is if, you know, from the perspective of enforcement, What does this look like on the street?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly a very, very simple code, one sentence, and kind of a broad code. So I think from an enforcement standpoint, we just need to understand that we have, a number of homeless people in this community, whatever that number is, it's a sizable number. And so they all kind of fit under this code currently. And so how the ability of the police department to enforce this across the city and what that looks like and what the expectation from the public is on how this is enforced is probably a question that I think will be asked. It's asked in previous codes that get passed. And so just a number of resources that we have to fully implement something, code change like this, not only on the police department, but then everything down the line with prosecutors and courts and jail facilities as well. So just from an enforcement standpoint, we have to understand that we're going to be able to enforce this in a much more limited capacity than is written.
Thanks.
Thank you. Eva Gardner, Municipal Attorney. I appreciate that this ordinance was prompted by the Grants Pass decision from the U.S. Supreme Court just about a year ago. But I do want to draw a distinction between the facts that were in the laws that were at issue in Grants Pass and what this ordinance does. This ordinance would criminalize camping everywhere in the municipality and go straight to criminal penalties. The local law at issue in Grants Pass actually had a stepped approach. It initially involved fines and then banning from an area, and then it went into criminal penalties. So we do have a distinction there. I think the curtailed public appropriate version of the legal analysis is that this would be subject to litigation challenge. With that said, it is not a new idea. Other cities have tried similar things, have explored ways to do this. And actually the municipal attorney's office for several months working with the mayor's office has been exploring a different approach to potential Title VIII use as a tool, one more tool in the toolbox to address really problematic encampments.
Sure. Thanks. I have a list of people. Mr. Voland, I have you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I want to first state that I appreciate the sponsors bringing this forward and Mr. McCormick highlighting some very real public safety issues in illegal camps. To the chief's point about capacity, that is also a very real reality. And I think the way that I'm thinking about that is, speeding tickets. APD certainly doesn't have enough capacity to give everyone who's out there on the road right now a speeding ticket. But if they never issued any speeding ticket, how would that impact people's behavior? So one question that I have for the sponsors, and in light of hearing the municipal attorney's explanation, was that, I guess I'm interested in a diversionary approach. And going back to the analogy of speeding ticket, sometimes when you get your first speeding ticket, you get instead of getting a ticket or a citation, you get a warning. Was there any thought on the part of the sponsors to maybe have an escalating approach, where perhaps if someone is offered an opportunity for housing or for shelter or even for behavioral health treatment within a specified window of time, if they turn down an offer or two, okay, then it moves to a stiffer penalty for violating code regarding illegal camping.
Yeah.
Was there any? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. And using your analogy of speed limit or speeding tickets.
Mr. McCormick, I just want to clarify the
Yes.
record. It's you speaking. It's Mr. McCormick. Go ahead and respond.
Oh, thank you. Yep, Keith McCormick. So using your example of speeding tickets, officers have discretions. People get warnings with speeding tickets. Officers will still maintain officer discretion of being able to direct people to shelter.
Okay, so then my understanding, Mr. McCormick, it is not the intention of the sponsors to have any type of opportunity provided first, or you get one warning or two warnings, or you want to jump right to the the misdemeanor. Is that what I'm understanding?
It's at officer discretion. They could address them and direct them to shelter. They don't have to arrest them.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Woland. Okay, next on the list, I have Ms. Silvers. Ms. Silvers, are you able to unmute? No? Okay. All right, we'll move on. Mr. Johnson. Oh. Yeah, let's move on to Mr. Johnson and Ms. Silvers. Let's see if we can get you on. Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, quick question, then maybe a substantive one. You mentioned, Municipal Attorney Gardner, that you're looking at an alternative approach. Can you provide any insights on when we might see that proposal?
I think fairly soon.
Like weeks, months, sometime this summer?
I think the assembly should be seeing it within the next couple of weeks.
Okay, okay.
Subject to change, finalizing drafting, but it is something that has been in development for a while.
Yeah. No, that's fair. And I guess my question, which has already been kind of hinted at, is trying to understand what this would mean from an enforcement perspective. So I could imagine at one end of the spectrum, we say we are going to broadly charge people for engaging in camping. We know that there are hundreds of people who theoretically could be charged if this was passed as written, right? Let's just to contemplate. We approve this and then the law goes into effect. Now, if we're talking about using it broadly, I mean, that's, every person who gets charged with a crime, right? There's APD goes out, they do an investigation, they submit their evidence, it's submitted, assigned to a prosecutor, it has a court date. If somebody doesn't show up, there's a warrant, jail time, probation, et cetera, et cetera. Like, that's a very expensive thing to do. And I don't know if anybody has a number they can attach to what it costs in terms of person hours to charge and prosecute somebody for even a Class B misdemeanor. But I mean, if they do, I'd be curious to hear that so that we could, kind of take that into consideration. The other end of the spectrum, they're suggesting maybe we just use this as a very limited tool where officers exercise discretion. So if we're at that end, I guess my question would be, how would we decide who would be charged and who wouldn't be charged? And I'm kind of looking at the chief of police, because ultimately your folks would have to go out there and exercise this. And how would you do that in a way that is achievable with our current manpower, but also feels like it's perhaps being fair and reasonable in the way we're utilizing it? Do you have any sense of what it would look like?
Through the chair member, Johnson, I think, prioritizing what is not only important to us as a body here, as a municipality and elected body, as well as a community, and like what we would consider vulnerable areas of the city would be something that is always going to be helpful in terms of enforcing a code such as this or some variation of this, so that we can ensure we're investing the resources in a paired version, kind of a pared down manner where we can accomplish kind of a state objective. So, with the enforcement piece and getting your question, very broad. The way that's written, and just in terms of the broad perspective, is that could change on a daily basis, on a call for service basis. And so there could be a lack of consistency, certainly. If that helps at all.
I mean, a little bit. I guess I'd be curious to maybe hear a little bit more. I mean, I imagine, you would not have to drive far in this town to see somebody camping. Are we expecting that if APD, sees somebody in a tent, they're going to get out, they're going to go talk to them, and then what would their criteria be to determine whether or not to forward criminal charges or pursue some other course of action?
I mean, that's yet to be determined based on this policy, but I can say that we'd have to provide some direction to officers. I mean, that you're right. We have camping all over the place, and so we could have 20 officers working the street, all being engaged in some version of this at this point in time, as written as it is today. So we'd have to provide that direction in the future. So, and we'd also have to set the expectation for the public that every time there's a camp that's seen, it's not going to be 100% enforced. Like we just don't have the capacity to do that.
Okay, thanks. I feel like just for my consideration, it'd be helpful to maybe have a more fulsome picture of what this would look like in practice if adopted.
Mr. Constant.
Thank you. I share a number of those concerns. What does this look like? History shows us that Mountain View and Fairview are the place where things don't get enforced. Poor people live there, so that's where homeless people belong. And that's just Anchorage's history since way back. And we had some very, I would say, foaming at the mouth emails about how there's no infrastructure or services in South Anchorage. Over my dead body, should you put anything here? And so the default answer of enforcement, if we're going to do it and it's not uniform, means that there will be places where we just kind of tacitly turn our head. And this is not a stroke to the police department. This is just reality. And that turning of our head turns into my neighbors in my constituency paying the price for everyone else's sin. So that's kind of the beginning of this conversation. Now, Mr. Johnson's point about what does this look like if we do this to the extent that it's fair and equitable across town and we are implementing this code? What does it cost? What's the staffing levels? I've had some conversations with folks. What's the vacancy rate at the Anchorage jail? How many bodies can we get in there if we're forced moving people off the streets into the camps, as a strict criminalization of homelessness would appear to require if we're going to apply the law fairly and equitably to everybody similarly situated, other than in poor neighborhoods, of course. And so the things that I think about that look like expenses that have to get added to this are going to be a police team that's addressing homelessness and they're sweeping camps. It can't be patrol. It would have to be a team of police that's their job. We would need a team of prosecutors who would be specialized at working these cases, because there's nothing worse than what we have seen before in about 2012, 2013, where the police were arresting people and they were taking them to the jail, and the jail was letting them out, or the court, they're taking them to court, the court was letting them out, and the cop was still doing paperwork for hours longer than the person was actually in the process of adjudication before they were going through this long-term process. And so we could tie down our police force to be doing paperwork instead of actually protecting our communities, enforcing laws, if we were to strictly apply this. So I have a lot of concerns. I think there is a number that we need to think about cost. You can't just do this without paying for it. And so I have a substitute version coming forward that has a tax levy associated to it so that we can be realistic about if we're going to do it, we pay. I also have heard reports of at least 2 other substitute versions that are in the works. And so know that this conversation is going to kind of broaden for a while before it narrows. With that, then I would offer that it's a very interesting conversation. And I personally am not supportive of criminalization, but I am very interested to see where this conversation goes. And I'm just notifying everyone at least one S version is coming forward, and I've heard a couple more.
Thank you. I am noting the time and a long list of folks who want to speak. And I'm guessing there are folks in the audience that wanted to testify as well. I had committed to making this a rather short conversation. And so I am going to end the conversation at this point. If you have additional questions, please ask the folks there. We will have more discussion on this in the future. I do want to just see a quick show of hands of who would like to speak in the audience, knowing that we have a rather short amount of time. Okay, so I think we can probably get.
Mr. Chair, can I just get a point of information before we go to audience participation?
Go ahead.
So this is scheduled to be heard at our next meeting. So what is the venue that you're imagining for further conversation on this? And are the sponsors open to taking more time?
It was on the meeting, so it'll be discussed at that meeting. I don't know of any other meeting that was what I was referring to when it gets introduced to our meeting. So, and if it gets to discussed at that meeting, or it's delayed, or a work session is called, a variety of things can happen. So, but my understanding at this point is it's on the agenda for us to discuss at the next meeting.
Okay, right. And then can I ask the sponsors, are they open to taking more time?
Yeah,
I think I would like
go ahead
to have public comment on the June 24th meeting.
All right, thanks.
You want to share your thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, from my perspective, I definitely want to hear the public's comment on the June 24th meeting. And if the conversation balloons from there, then it goes from there. But we do definitely want to hear the public comment on the 24th.
Okay. Thanks. Okay, so I am going to ask that we can extend the meeting by 15 minutes to accommodate our folks in the audience. And if you need to leave, you can, but we're gonna make sure to accommodate as many people as we can. So if we can just have one at a time come up, the microphone is right here. If you could share your name for the record, if we could put the clock up, thank you very much. And we do. But you'll have three minutes. Share your name for the record, and you can begin now. I'm ready.
Scott, good afternoon. My name is Ron Oleva. 50 years resident. I own Grub Steak Auction at the famous 3rd and Ingra. Adjacent property to the Brother Francis Shelter at the Navigation Center, and within 1 block on famous Carlick Street to Beans Cafe. I'm here today for a multitude of reasons, but the biggest reason I'm here is to present Bindlestick Park, a homeless campus, which would include tiny homes, which have just been purchased, a 20-man camp with kitchen services, conference room. I have 3 parcels, which can be expanded to 10 spaces, and I am bidding the contract for the vehicle space. And we're also going to provide a conference room and a donated space for a police substation. Nothing has done more to the Heritage Land Bank site than Mr. Rollins in his patrolling, adamantly, daily, and constantly. And that site has never been so beautiful. And I testified supporting his deal. But what I want to do is get scheduled at this committee and present both with a PowerPoint and my proposal, which is modeled after the Catholic Charities of Southern Nevada, that is one of the most successful homeless facilities across the nation. And I visited it along with others. But I'll be moving my business and I'll try not to get verklempt and emotional, but it's no longer economically or safe to operate the auction business. It's death by 1,000 knives. I can't win, so the highest and best use is to modify it. Now, you made a lot of rules, and I showed you code and abatement, the good neighbor policy. Daryl Hess, our ombudsman, researched it, 31 pages. I submitted it as a violation of conditional use. There was no enforcement, no response, even from the Archbishop. So sadly, this will work, and it'll be economical because it's going to be a recycling center. Everyone will work, train, be in a drug rehab program, alcohol program. It'll be multifunctional and truly monitored. And the funds received, just like Bishop Sadek, will have a store, and they take out $300,000 a year from Fairview. But this money is going to be put back into the program, partially offsetting any cost.
Sir, thank you for your testimony. Your time's up.
My time is never up.
Well, today
I'll
it is.
be back.
All right. We'll have the next speaker come up, please. Okay. You can
schedule me.
All right. If you could state your name for the record, ma'am, and you can begin. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, my name is Amber Brophy King, and I was born and raised in East Anchorage, and now I live in Midtown. About a month ago, I saved a woman's life with Narcan right in Anchorage by Diamond Center. She was overdosing on the sidewalk, and when I called 911, I was literally told to just leave her there and not administer Narcan. I did it anyway and saved her. And when I called back, there was no ambulance on the way. Last year, my home was being actively broken into, and it took 3 hours for APD to respond. This isn't just a failure of response, it was abandonment, and it mirrors how the city continues to abandon its homeless population, shuffling people around, burning through budgets with no real outcomes. We've spent over $250 million, and what do we have to show for it? More tents, more overdoses, more crime, and now parking lots being passed off as policy with no data on who will even really use them. This is not a resource issue. Anchorage already provides free housing, 3 meals a day, free transportation, cell phones, even pet care. What we lack is accountability and results. Where is the data showing how many people have successfully exited homelessness through regained stability? Just yesterday, the city at the RFP meeting stated it had no data on these parking lots and who they would serve. And today you're tugging at the heartstrings, claiming high schoolers and single fathers need them. You can't just make things up to justify failed ideas. At the same time, you continue to award lucrative contracts to friends, including duplicating successful models from cities that have actually reduced homelessness. It's obvious now that protecting special interest is outweighing solving the problem. We need a public audit of homelessness as spending, one standard of law for all, real mental health addiction and housing intervention, and an end to insider bidding in favor of proven solutions. If I, a taxpayer, crap on the sidewalk or smoke crack on a sidewalk, I'd be arrested. But we are living in two sets of laws, and what we're doing clearly is not working. This isn't just a public safety crisis. It's an economic, social, and moral one, and it's affecting who's staying in Anchorage, who's visiting Anchorage, and who invests here. I miss my city, and I know I'm not alone. We keep being told this is a work in progress, but let's be honest, it's not progress. It's a complete failure to Anchorage. And also, I'd like to get one thing more on the record, how unprofessional it was for Mr. Constance to get up and leave while I was speaking, but also how unprofessional it was for him to turn around and mouth F you to me on the floor when I was sitting right there. Thank you.
Thank you, testimony, ma'am. Okay, next up, please. Let's keep it together. Next up, please come up and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes. You can begin.
I'm Dean Butch. I live in Midtown. Everything that we've seen is throwing money at housing and whatnot. But what about these individuals that don't want housing, that are happy with living where they live? You take Davis Park, and it's a perfect example of what happens when this is just let go, unmanaged, let run wild. It was allowed to become that. For another example, the structure in Spenard this spring that burned down over behind the Holiday Inn. That was a 2-story structure. How did they even allow that to become that big? There's just no enforcement, no policing, anything. And like I said, once again, Mountain View, Davis Park is a perfect example of just what happens when it's left unmanaged. And it was somebody else's problem, not ours. This was lived this way. Something needs to be done with the people that don't want to move into permanent housing, don't want to live in a hotel. What about a structure such as the old camping area of Russian Jack Park? Open that up, but supply sanitation facilities, dumpsters, but manage it, police it, make them clean up after themselves. It's, I don't understand why something like that can't happen. But because as it is, it's I'm all for giving somebody a hand up if they want it, but a lot of them don't want a hand up. They'll take whatever they can for free, but as we know, nothing in life is free. Somebody always pays for it, and this seems to be this is the taxpayers paying for this. Like I said, I've born and raised here, and I've only watched this place go downhill. And that I've spoken my word, so thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you. Make Anchorage great again.
All right. Thanks. Come on up. Share your name for the record, where you live in town, and you can begin. Go ahead and sit down so you can use the mic. You can go ahead and begin.
Thanks for hearing me out today. My name is Anthony Cernatus. I live in South Anchorage. I can appreciate the intentions behind trying to offer relief for people who live in their cars. But considering the crime and the littering and just the unpleasantness that typically comes with homeless communities, it's hard to understand the logistics behind considering putting these locations in some of the safest neighborhoods that we have in Anchorage, such as the possibility of this going on 100th and C Street, I think, by Cabela's. I'm also a real estate agent. Excuse me. And one of my buyers just backed out of a deal because they were so startled by the possibility of this being there that they forfeited $8,000 of their earnest money once they saw this on the news. So I just wanted to come here today and express my concerns. I'm grateful that you guys are listening to us, but I really hope you reconsider the location of our safe neighborhoods, mixing it with crime camps. What are they going to do during the day? Are they going to infiltrate our neighborhoods with crime? We don't even know. Maybe it's just not a good idea to put it down there somewhere. But why ruin a good thing? That's all I have to say.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your testimony. Okay, if you can share your name for the record and where you live in Anchorage, and you can begin.
Good morning. My name is Jacob Powell. I live in North Star. Good morning. I want to start my testimony by telling you a little bit about who I am. I'm a homeowner. I live very close to some of the larger camps in Midtown, some of which have been abated. I'm a participating member of my community council. I work with 2 foster youth, one of which my partner and I are foster parent to. Both of those youth have spent long periods of time unhoused on the street and struggle with substance use. I know for a fact that they will end up in a camp if they do not have the support that they need and they were not with us. In addition, my partner works daily with homeless individuals to ensure their healthcare needs are met. Her and I are also victims of property crime. We left our garage door open last night after returning home from an assembly meeting at midnight, and about $6,000 in property was stolen from us overnight. But I have homeowners insurance. I was compensated fully for my loss. I want you to keep all of that in mind as I share the rest of my testimony. I'm really not sure quite what I can say to convey my feelings today to this community. I'm full of anguish and rage. I don't claim to know the solutions here, and I know that we don't have the resources to properly address homelessness in a humane way. But I do know what happened yesterday was not a solution. It was a misguided act of violence that I hope our city never repeats. My partner and I went to Davis Park last night to distribute water and food to individuals who were still in the area. All was appreciated, but the water especially. The thirst will stick with me. Some of which had just finished picking through what was left of their belongings under fear of violent arrest by police with long guns who they will be quick to remind you were less lethal, to make an attempt to recover family photos, identification, and 1 or 2 items of comfort. I hope that if you are on this committee, or if you are listening, or you are someone working with homelessness in the city, that you were there yesterday, not just standing on the sidelines with dozens of police cars and not a single firefighter while police's homes burned. I hope you were, if you were not there, that you make an effort to get out into the community you represent, to speak to your constituents living on the street, to ask them directly how the events of yesterday affected them. Because all I can say is what a waste, what a violent, brutal waste. I want the city officials who support mass abatements like this to think seriously about what their real motivations are and be honest with the public about their intent and their reasoning. This is a violent, destructive act that cut people off from a steady base of support from the public, a health department, Hope team, and others working hard to support the most vulnerable people in our community. I want to close by sharing some words that an acquaintance of mine shared yesterday after spending the day at Davis. To me, mass abatements to address criminal elements in the encampments is like bulldozing all of Airport Heights because a few houses in the neighborhood were harboring violent crime. Did the people who were ejected from Davis yesterday say, yes, please destroy the home I have lived in for years, the shelters I have created for myself? This is what I want to feel safer? No, they did not. I hope you get out into the parks in which people dispersed, many of which are directly across the street and very close by, and speak face to face with the human beings the city violently displaced yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Okay, you're up. If you can share your name and you're for the record, and you can begin.
All right, so Jamie Lopez, East Anchorage, formerly Coalition, formerly homeless, a little under the weather. That gentleman summed it up. I don't exactly have prepared remarks today. This is not the famous Mon Mothma speech from Andor season 2, equating, the Gorman massacre. I'm not talking about the Reichstag fire or any of this stuff, which is, they timed the abatement just before, 2025-74. No, but what I will say is that, people are being failed, and they're being failed over and over and over again. And then essentially what happens is you criminalize people, you displace them, and then you claim victory. And then the cycle begins anew. People lack vision that are here right now. They don't have lived experience. They don't understand this. They don't understand how to solve the problems, how to actually stabilize people so that you aren't repeating the cycle over and over and over again. Is there the politics of politics and trying to sell it to the public? Yes, it's how you pitch it, how you think it, how you find the creative solutions to deal with the problem without having to basically say everyone's a criminal. You look at AO 2025-74. Last year, you had AO 2024-26. I called the Fire Island Escape from New York plan. where you can't camp here, you can't camp there, you can't camp anywhere. And then you go into the special meeting April 18th last year, and you split it into two, 39 and 40. 39 was essentially can't camp anywhere with a criminal misdemeanor. 40 was designated parking. Parking passed. The other one was defeated. Makes Altel went up, gave good remarks, despite a lot of trespasses and a number of things, because I used to work coalition. Basically, she got it right on the money right there. And so the simple fact of the matter is, Eric Glatt went up, said the same thing. I'm disappointed he did not come up and say the same thing today. At that time, somebody asked me if I wanted to testify last year, and I was in the back of the room, the shadow. Typically, I am the shadow in most places around town. Yeah, I'm sure you know it too, Mr. Case. But essentially, I said, no, at that time, I'm getting handed a lot of money, or excuse me, not money, a lot of meals. I was getting handed a lot of meals, 130 to 150 meals that I was handing out at Cuddy and Davis Park. And I did not want to make it difficult for somebody to hand me the food that could essentially feed people. And so I said, you know what, I think you got this. And then it was defeated. And the reason it was defeated is because you had a Republican in office, you had Democrats in control of the assembly, and with the politics of politics in the opposition, the circle of friends basically said, no, we're going to fight the good fight. But then the next month, the election happens, and they introduce 2024 55S, stripping the criminal misdemeanor component, essentially passing it where you can't camp anywhere. And now here we are again. And we're essentially trying to criminalize all the homeless in town, the 1,500 by coalition numbers, so that they do not have the ability to get housing. They do not have the ability to get jobs. People need places to go. You have to designate places for people to go, and then you have to support them so that, they have access to electricity, food, the other things that people enjoy in life. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the testimony. Come on up, and can I just see a show of hands on how many more people want to testify? Thanks. Okay, so you'll be the last one. Is there anybody on the phone that I need to be aware? Okay, all right. So you're our last person for the day. If you can share your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Sure, Roger Branson. I'm out of Eagle River. I'm a longtime mental health and homeless advocate. I've been active in the camps, the seasonal camps, regularly since 2019. And I just want to comment on yesterday's abatement. These are individuals dealing with very complex issues. The community, both inside and out of the camps, there's lots of stigma, lots of shame around being homeless, lots of shame around having substance abuse issues, and there's lots of crime that occurs as a result of individuals preying on the vulnerable. Yesterday's abatement, though, was the lead up to it, and the actual execution, without taking away from anyone that testified prior to me, was as good as it could have gotten. There's just horribly complex issues. I want to give kudos to the social workers, to the nonprofits that showed up to help provide resources to all who were willing to get to it. And I want to thank the administration, the police, the fire department, the barrage of individuals who were there showing concern. Was it perfect? We've got some areas to improve still, but this is the best one, the closest to that I have seen personally in those 6 years. And I do want to give credit to the administration. It's very challenging, but to the best of my knowledge, no one was injured during it. And I'm also not sure if there was actually any arrests that occurred from it. I certainly didn't see anything, but there was concerns that there could have been some more pushback than we got. So incredibly difficult, but given the circumstances, an incredibly awesome job. We still have some work to do. We got some community work, we got some stigma and whatnot to address and get through, but I just wanted to give thanks and credit where I think it's due. So thank you.
Thank you, sir, for testimony. Anything else from members? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for being here.